Hi there, David Taylor on Mr Pelargonium, back with another video for the Pelargonium and Geranium Society. Midwinter now, so it is a relatively quiet time of year. But for me, we're not too far away, of course, from that turn of the year when I will be starting to look at some of my Regals to give them a cut back for the show season for next year. Other than that, it's just normal maintenance, which we'll have a look at. Again, I do like to remind you, of course, to keep your plants clean and tidy. So let's have a look. Hi there, well, welcome back to the channel. I realise it's quite a quiet time of year and I've not been doing a great deal of videos because all I can really do is reiterate what I get up to with regard to the maintenance of your plants during the winter. I'm filming this on Saturday, I think it's the 11th today, 11th of December. So we're into midwinter now in the Northern Hemisphere. We have actually had quite a bit of cold weather. 2 weeks ago, the last full weekend in November, we actually had quite a bit of snow in the south of England here, which is very unusual for November. I can't remember the last time we've had significant snowfall in the south of England in November, so it's quite unusual, but it's turned a bit milder since. Didn't last long, just the weekend. The plants are sort of very dormant realistically, particularly of course the zonals. Zonals of course now are in full sort of dormant mode, very short daylight hours, barely sort of where we are here in the UK, barely 6 hours good daylight a day now at this time of year. So the zonals in particular are very dormant. Now the other types of plants, of course, Regals, some of the scentids, they do tend to grow a little bit faster. So for instance, I've got here a scented variety. This is Fern Mint. I'm actually growing this as a small standard. You had to give this a cut back. But, you know, that's growing away quite strongly. So scented varieties, some of the scented, certainly Regals, will grow fairly fast at this time of year. Everything though, I am just giving a little, nothing more than a couple of millimetres of water. I went round and did all my plants yesterday, down to once a week. It's just literally keeping them ticking over. They're not growing much. So, you know, you don't need any more than that. Feed mixed in with it, full strength feed, but as I said, they're only getting it once a week. It's just keeping them growing. Of course, Regals are a little bit different because they are growing fairly strongly. I mean, we can see some of these, one or two, couple of sort of older leaves just dying back now. This is mostly in Regals because of the light. Regals are very responsive to light. So, you know, when the light is really low at this time of year, you know, they will sort of put a bit of effort into keeping their tips growing, which is what I'll come on to in a moment, talking about stopping. But, you know, they'll take the strength away from the base of their stems where some of the other leaves are. So, you know, that they will just begin to die back. So you'll get the odd dying leaf back. And just again, it's the same old thing. Just keep dead and dying leaves off your plants. Strip them off. Won't cause any harm at all. Just chuck those in the bin. That's one more or less done, I think. But they are growing quite strongly. And as I say, I mean, this one in particular, this is Shriven and Pearl. This is one that always does quite well in the shows. It's one of my own. I think I've said before, Fibrex, I think, are releasing this in their sort of new catalogue. But this will be stopped. We're coming up to turn of the year, just the very end of December, early January. I will go with giving this a stop. It'll be cut back relatively hard. I know it's very early, really, for stopping for shows. But for some reason, my Regals always flower relatively late. No doubt the positioning of my glass house. And so I will give these a bit of a stop. in about 2 to 3 weeks. But I will certainly do a video of, I've done plenty of them before, but we'll stock 1 or 2 of these in a video in 2 or 3 weeks' time. Just to show you what I do, it'll be stripping the leaves back, cutting the stems back relatively hard, and that really sort of will pay with producing hopefully a really good bushy plant for the shows. Got 1 or 2 blooms actually that I've let go. This is a standard. I think this is just a seedling of the Pag's Chairman Steve Pollard's. Quite like this one, nice single bloom. Again, lower leaves on the standards now are just dying back a bit, so they can just be knocked off. But you could argue that's actually forming a head. I don't know what I'm going to do with that yet. But the one thing is, of course, with all your plants, is that you don't need to rush to pot on at this time of year. If you've got something that you're desperate to move up, you can do. But one of the issues that you'll have is that it can, of course, just sit in, say, damp compost, and the roots don't really want that. They want to be relatively tight in the pot now at this time of year. I mean, I've got lots of youngsters here. These potentially could be moved on, but I will leave them in there. They're more than happy just to sit in there, getting a little bit of water. The roots are sort of bounding out the base. But I won't move these on now until the spring. February at the earliest, when the daylight hours really begin to extend out a bit. I won't be potting anything on there. All my show plants have been in their final pots now for at least a couple of months, probably even longer for most of them. So they're all growing away without any issues whatsoever. Let's say 1 or 2 blooms. There's a nice red. That's a commercial variety. One of the cell plants, Sembola, that one, nice red. Now, one of the things to remember with blooms in the winter is that you'll often get quite different colour shades to those that you would get in the summer. Now, this plant, this is a point south, but this almost comes over as being very sort of pretty. If I sort of home in on this, we can see here this is like got a sort of, it's almost white with a very light pink edge, but this is purely winter colouring. This is not how this plant would normally be. It's normally a very sort of deep creamy beige colour. It's difficult to sort of name the colours, hint of salmon in the summer. But this sort of winter colouring is really quite different. There's certainly no pink edge to it, as in this case now, normally in the main flowering season of the summer. But again, it's just a lack of light. And another example is one of my seedling zonals here. This is actually quite red, quite a deepish red in the summer. But it's a very sort of palish, blandish pink colour at this time of year. It doesn't affect all plants, but it certainly affects quite a number of them. Obviously, the white ones, it doesn't affect at all. And anything that's normally light goes quite dark, as in this one, which I showed you earlier. This is actually a very, very pale pink normally, but it's almost quite deep magenta with a white centre on this one at this time of year. So yeah, there is quite a bit of colour variation with winter flowering when you let your zonals flower in the winter. Everybody knows I've done a good batch of Regal seedlings for flowering the first time next year. Although the majority of them were a single cross between the Shriven and Pearl, which is this big growing one here, and Marie Rudlin, which is flowering down here. The variation of all of the seedlings is quite marked. Now I've got this, we've got some very dense, thick, big leaved versions. We've got some very open leaved versions. We've got some very pale green leaved versions. So clearly there's going to be a marked difference between most of these when the time comes for flowering next sort of April, May, hopefully. Got a good number over the back there as well that are varying in all their shapes and sizes. So it's going to be really interesting to see the different flowers that potentially come from them. They're all getting exactly the same treatment. They're all in more or less exactly the same size pot. I mean, this could do with potting on really, but I won't do this probably now until about February, just to give them a boost prior to their main growing time. Okay, so there we are. That's just about it from me today. There's not really a great deal. As I say, I'm just constantly repeating myself, really. So it's just a question of very light watering. If you've got your potted plants in a glass house or conservatory, wherever they may be, if you're keeping them growing during the winter, very light watering now, very low light levels. They don't need to grow very fast at all. But if you've got Regals growing, they will be growing fairly strongly. They like the cooler conditions, you see. So, there's not really a great deal more for me to add. Just as I say, constantly keep an eye on your plants. Make sure you've not got any rotting leaves or blooms. All that it remains for me to do, of course, now is to wish you all a very happy Christmas and a very happy New Year. As I say, and I'll be back around about the New Year time when we just begin to cut back our Regals and almost kick the season off as we begin to go into that late winter period. So I'll see you again very soon.